this is good, but no, so they made all these different varieties, right, and then other companies jumped on that, and so when you go and you look for spaghetti sauce, you've got maybe 100 different choices, So the same thing with paint, right? And when you think about paints, which color is it? Well, when you're thinking using Plato's ideas, you have to have an idea for each color that you could recognize. So instead of it being a nice simple system, it turns out to be an infinite complex problem. So the infinite ideas end up becoming more and more complex instead of a nice simple explanation for things. And then you talk about inventions like TVs. Is there an idea for the perfect TV in the ideal world? RCA. No, look at all the new things we've got. Were those always there in the infinite collection of ideas, just waiting for us to come up with it? That doesn't work. So it really ends up causing lots of problems for Plato. And I think this guy was one of the ones, Aristotle, when we look at Aristotle's life, he was a teenager. His father and mother were both physicians. And as physicians, especially, for example, the father was the court physician to Philip of Macedonia. He's a Stagirite. Stagira is a Greek town, but it's very close to Macedonia. By the way, Macedonia is not Greece, and the Greeks don't consider Macedonia Greek, and the Macedonians don't consider themselves Greek. In fact, there was a big fight just a few years ago before they could join NATO because or the EU, I guess it was, because the Greeks didn't like them calling themselves Macedonia because it's just crazy. But either way, just so you know, they're two different countries, although they both speak Greek. So that's interesting, right? Well, Philip of Macedon had a son named Alexander, who we now call Alexander the Great. So hold on to that one. Alexandros means savior of men, by the way. So that's kind of fun. Philip means lover of horses. Philippa, philia means love, and hippo means horse, right? Remember, hippopotamus is a river horse, etc., right? So in any case, when he was a teenager, his parents died, and his uncle sent him to Athens to study with Plato. And so he's not even 20 yet, and he starts studying with Plato, and he stays there. He's growing up, learning everything. They think of him as the bookworm because he's always reading and stuff. In any case, he loves those who love the ideas, so he's in love with Plato and his school, but at the same time, he thinks they're wrong. They're completely wrong. There are no things that exist unless there's physical matter in them. All these ideas that Plato has, the conception of them being the perfect things, and that's what really structures the universe, that's just all nonsense. The only things that exist actually have to have substance. And he'll give us that in the categories. Very first one. Everything has to have substance. So we get that. ousia, by the way. When you get to the big argument with the Nicene Council over the nature of Jesus, and they argue whether he was one with God or one and God. They argue over homo ousia or homo ousia. That was one of the big fights in the council. And so we still argue, they're arguing over one iota of difference. There's just one letter I between the two points of view. It's kind of fun. But so everything has to have substance or it doesn't exist. No such thing as all these abstract ideas. That's ridiculous. And also, everything must also have quantity. You can measure it. There's, if it's something that exists, you have to be able to measure it. It has to have shape and stuff like that. Or quality. It has to have quality. In other words, everything that exists has to have all these 10 categories. So quality. It has to have relative relationships to things. For example, it also has to be in a place. So where is it? And it has also relative position. So it's sitting down, it's lying down, it's flying, whatever, right? You also have to have the conditions. So what does he mean by this? Well, it's at rest, or it's armed, or it's wearing clothing, etc. It's either doing an action, and it's being affected. It has affection, in a sense of, we're writing on the paper, or we're mixing the dough, etc. So all of these categories are things that everything that exists has to have, and as a result, the abstract ideas that Plato is coming up with are just nonsense. He spent basically 20 years studying with Plato, and now he's going to launch off on his own and start his own school instead of the academy. Instead of being an idealist, everything is ideas, he's a realist. Everything is essentially, the real stuff. We might also call him an empiricist. So everything is empirical. It's kind of fun. One of the Roman philosophers was called Sextus Empiricus, which literally means the sixth sense. I don't know if you saw dead bodies, dead people. That's a joke too. How many folks saw the movie The Sixth Sense? Always the same folks have seen the movies that I'm referring to. Might be a culture requirement. Watch all these movies before you take Intro to Philosophy. Okay, so where do you find this list? You find it in Aristotle. So if we want to go to the Greek Roman authors, and we want to go to Aristotle, and you could look under categories, of course. The assignment I've recommended, and this is, I really have to explain this, is go to the metaphysics. And if you've been enjoying reading Plato, you'll discover that Aristotle is boring as sin. He's famous for this. This is, in fact, I highly recommend, there's a link to a video called Aristotle's Lagoon. Did anybody see it yet? I have it in my notes, I think. In fact, there's 4 links to it because it's one of those BBC videos that's on 4 separate links. But have a look at that, Aristotle's Lagoon. It's really beautiful. It's an excellent video, so have a look at that. But also try to look at the metaphysics and see what you can make of it. It's very difficult. if anything, it's considered like teacher's notes. So, you know, it's more for his students that already are familiar with what's going on. In fact, in some places he says, this is really difficult, but you know, you can understand it if you already know what I'm talking about, basically. You know, so it's kind of dense. But Aristotle is going to do this to everything. So he's going to do it to grammar, characteristics of language. He's going to do it to logic. And next class, I'll start off by talking about that. In fact, the quiz question I have for you is, I didn't do a quiz question yet, did I?
No.
Okay. Can you give me a true sentence? Give me a true sentence.
Based on Aristotle's definition, right?
Yeah. He's gonna. We're going to use the. So this is still the case. So our contemporary logic is still built on this. So even though this is from, what, 300 BC, this is still the heart of our logic. So Aristotle invents logic. I would argue, obviously there were things considered true and false before him because Plato talks about it. Yes.
It's not the quiz question about the character.
Yeah, if you didn't answer that one already, that would have been associated with what we were just talking about. So yeah, if you haven't answered the question about do you think you have, is your character unchanging, basically? You know, boy, girl, you know, they're completely different, aren't they? You can tell them apart, usually. Not just holding them up and so on, you know, but you just look at their face and you can tell. That kid is going to be a pain in the ass, right? She's going to be sweet, right? You know how that works? But yeah, so that's a question I didn't know if I had
That should be,
answered.
that's group 5 for the one you just said.
So that one's number 5?
Yeah,
That's group 5. You got
And today is what, our 4th maybe?
I thought this one was the virtue question.
So you did the Jesus one. If you're knocking on the door, the next one is do you agree? Again, that person's characteristics were.
Yeah.
Can we just do
Yeah.
both or?
You could do both, or well, we'll talk about true and false next class.
Maybe we don't.
Well, we
So maybe-
did this, your character things. That was one of the quiz questions.
Yeah, some of you have already, I know some of you have already answered that one, so. Hello.
Mr. Jamison, what was I gonna say?
You're getting old. You're supposed to wait a little while.
Sorry.
You get old.
Well, my physical body's old, so. Only a
I'll
matter of
wait,
time before
I'll
this
wait
goes.
until you remember it. I
Sorry.
don't think you quote Shakespeare, but there you go. That's Juliet.
For
I've
true.
forgotten why I called thee back. No, I'll wait until I remember.
So a true sentence is something that is something and cannot be contradicted, correct?
So that's your cell phone?
Yes, this is my cell phone.
That's a true sentence.
Okay.
Can I give you an example of false sentence?
Sure.
The cat's on a mat.
It could be, but it's not.
No, it can move. It's not specifically something that's you can prove that's going to be there
Well, that,
forever.
I mean, if the cat is at the moment on the mat, I would think if you said the cat is on the mat, that would be true. Then he gets up and walks off, and now the other cat
I
got
know I
up and
went to
left.
ChatGPT and they told that they give me that as a reason why it wouldn't be true.
Well, you can't trust ChatGPT. You'd be wrong. Well, that brings in the problem though of time. You know, it's a statement that we think of as true. Is it true always? Well, there's very few that are.
Okay, I don't understand.
traditional square of opposition. I'm not getting this thing.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll work on it on Wednesday.
Okay.
So, but you could read that page.
Oh, I read a bunch of it, and I'm just like, what? I
Ah.
understand Aristotle's how he proved. He said a true statement is proved, but I don't understand the traditional square of operation or opposition. So, unless it's going through the three
So
things that
he's